Tonight we trade your quiet, familiar room for a universe of tar, salt, and creaking timber. You stand on the stone flags of the East India Docks in London, on a chill, damp morning in the year 1845. The air is a thick soup of coal smoke, river mud, and the distant, sweet rotten smell of the city's markets. Before you, tethered to the wharf like a restive beast, is your new home, the HMS Liberty, a mail packet ship of 450 tons. She is a three-masted barquentine, her black hull streaked with white salt scars, her rigging a cat's cradle against the grey wool sky. Dockyard noise is a constant percussion. The bang of hammers, the shout of stevedores, the shriek of block and tackle lowering the very last crates into her hold. You are not a passenger. You have signed the articles. You are now an extra hand, a general-purpose body for a voyage that will cover nearly 20,000 miles, from this murky river to the bright, brutal shores of New South Wales and Van Diemen's Land. The truth is, statistically speaking, you're more likely to complete this voyage intact than a soldier is to survive a major campaign. But the sea has 1,000 quieter, more patient ways to claim you. Scurvy, a falling spar, a wave that simply picks you up and forgets to put you down. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your sea bag, containing everything you own in the world for the next 8 months, feels pitifully light on your shoulder. You cross the gangplank, a springy board of worn oak, and your boots meet the Liberty's deck for the first time. The wood is pale where it's been freshly holystoned, scrubbed with a block of sandstone, but already gritty underfoot. The sensation is immediate, a subtle, alive motion. The ship isn't just sitting in the water, she's breathing with it, a slight rolling lift and settle that speaks of the open ocean, not this confined basin. A harried-looking mate with a waxed moustache and a ledger barely glances at you, points to a hatch, and barks. Stow your kit below and report to the bosun for sorting. Look lively. The hierarchy is already asserting itself. You descend into a twilight realm. The 'tween decks, where you and the other dozen extra hands will sling your hammocks, is a space about 50 feet long and maybe 5.5 feet high. You cannot stand upright. The air is thick with the scent of damp wool, old wood, and the faint, not unpleasant smell of bilge water, a mix of seawater and the oil from the ship's timbers. Hammock hooks line the beams above, waiting. This is where you will sleep, eat, and exist when not on watch, for the better part of a year. You pick an unclaimed spot, stow your bag in a small locker, and climb back into the damp light. On deck, the final loading is a precise chaos. You are put to work immediately, heaving on ropes to swing cargo nets over the side. The holds are already packed deep with the sacred cargo, the mail sacks. Hundreds of them, oilskin wrapped and sealed with red wax, containing letters, government dispatches, newspapers, and precious personal correspondence for the colonies. They are the entire reason for the Liberty's existence. But around them, every cubic inch is packed with other goods. Crates of manufactured tools, bottles of port wine, scientific instruments for colonial surveyors, bundles of dress fabric, and small, private consignments for merchants in Sydney. One crate, being carefully lowered by 2 men, is marked simply "Live Plants," this side UP. Inside, you later learn, are cuttings of English oaks and elms, a desperate attempt by homesick colonists to reshape an alien landscape. Historians still argue whether the primary engine of the British Empire was military force or this relentless, mundane logistics, the crating and shipping of everything from bureaucratic forms to rose bushes. As you heave, you feel the ship settle deeper into the Thames. She is becoming heavier, more substantial, her connection to the land thinning with every item brought aboard. The captain, a man named Alistair Finch, observes from the quarterdeck. He is a silhouette of navy blue and polished brass, speaking quietly with his first mate. He doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. His authority is in the cut of his coat and the calm way he surveys his domain. You'll learn his face and moods later. For now, he is just another part of the machine. By late afternoon, the last crate is stowed, the hatches battened down. The crew, a mix of grizzled old salts and boys barely in their teens, muster on deck. The boatswain, a man with forearms like twisted hawser, calls the roll. You answer to your name, feeling the odd finality of it. The captain steps forward. "Men," he says, his voice carrying easily in the sudden quiet. "We have the King's mail. Our voyage is long. Do your duty, keep a sharp watch, and we'll see Spithead in good time." It's not a rousing speech. It's a transaction. There's skill and labor for his command and, hopefully, a safe passage. The tide turns. The dock lines are cast off, tossed in heavy coils onto the deck. A tugboat, belching black smoke, chuffs alongside, takes a line, and begins to nudge the Liberty's bow toward the center of the river. The sails are still furled, tied tightly to the yards with neat lines called gaskets. For now, the steam tug is your muscle. You stand at the rail as the docks, the warehouses, the sooty trees of London slide away. The ship is a passive thing, being pulled. But you feel the current of the Thames catch her, a new, more natural motion. You pass ships of every flag and condition, from massive East Indiamen to filthy collier brigs. The river widens, the air begins to smell more of salt and less of sewage. The light is failing, painting the muddy water in shades of pewter and gold. The tug gives a final toot of its whistle, releases the line, and turns back. Suddenly, the silence is profound, broken only by water against the hull and the cry of gulls. Captain Finch's order cuts through it. Hands to make sail. The deck erupts in controlled movement. You are shoved toward a rope. Haul with the chorus, lad. A sailor grins at you. You pull with a dozen others, the thick, tarred hemp burning through your palms. Above, with a series of heavy, rustling thuds, the great fore and aft sails on the mizzenmast unfold, then the square sails on the main. The canvas, grey in the dusk, flaps once, twice, then catches the wind coming up from the channel. It snaps taut with a sound like a gunshot. And the Liberty wakes up. She heels over, just a few degrees. The deck becomes a slope. The water alongside begins to rush past with a new, urgent hiss. The creaking of the hull becomes a language of strain and purpose. You are under sail, moving by wind and skill alone, down the Thames toward the open sea. The last smudges of land fade into a general darkness astern. The ship is now your entire world. Ahead lies the English Channel, then the Bay of Biscay, then the vast, empty Atlantic. You are cold, your hands are raw, and you have never felt anything so simultaneously terrifying and magnificent in your life. The voyage has truly begun. The Liberty is no longer a vessel, she is a universe. Her boundaries are the rail, her sky is the underside of the deck above you, and her laws are written in rope, wind, and the inflexible rhythms of the watch bell. That first night at sea, you learn the fundamental truth of life aboard. Every single thing has a place, and every single person has a function, and deviating from either is an offense against the fragile order that keeps you all alive. You are assigned to the port watch, under the command of Mr. Styles, the first mate. Your watch runs from 4 in the morning until 8, then again from 4 in the afternoon until 8 in the evening. It is a cycle that will carve your consciousness into blocks of exhausted duty and fractured sleep. Your home, the forecastle, pronounced forecastle, is a cramped, smoky cave at the front of the ship. Here, the regular sailors and extra hands like you eat, smoke, mend clothes, and, when chance allows, sleep. Your hammock is your only private space, a cocoon of canvas slung from the low beams. You learn to climb into it with a practiced roll, a skill harder than it looks, as the ship's motion tries to spill you onto the deck like a sack of potatoes. The air is permanently hazy with the smoke from a single, small, vile-smelling oil lamp and the pipes of off-duty men. It smells of wet wool, unwashed bodies, tar, and the ever-present tang of brine. Above you is the realm of the officers. The captain's cabin is right at the stern, a comparatively palatial space with windows, looking out over the ship's wake. It contains a proper bed, a desk for charts, and a small library. It is a world of polished wood and relative silence. Then comes the wardroom, where the mate, the surgeon, a young, nervous-looking man named Dr. Alderton, and the ship's clerk take their meals. Their fare is marginally better: preserved meats, ship's biscuit with slightly fewer weevils, and a ration of wine or small beer. You, meanwhile, queue with a tin plate for your mess from the galley, a tiny, brick-lined hut on deck housing the ship's stove. The cook, a man missing 2 fingers, doles out a monotonous rotation of salted beef or pork, boiled into submission with dried peas, and your daily pound of hardtack. Ah, the hardtack. This is your bread, your sustenance. It's a simple flour and water biscuit, baked rock hard to survive months at sea. You learn to tap it sharply on the table to dislodge the weevils, the tiny beetles that inevitably infest it, before dunking it in your tea or coffee to soften it enough to chew. It's a widely accepted historical fact that this dreary, vitamin C deficient diet, coupled with months of physical labor, was a direct recipe for scurvy, the ancient scourge of sailors. But the Royal Navy had, by your time, largely solved it. You receive a daily ration of lime juice, mixed with a grudging allotment of sugar to make it palatable. It's this practice that will earn British sailors the nickname limeys, and it's the reason your gums will likely remain firmly attached to your teeth for the duration of this voyage. Your duties are the grammar of this wooden world. You stand watch, which means staring at an empty horizon for 4 hours, fighting a desperate battle against sleep. You learn to hand, reef, and steer, to climb the ratlins, the rope ladders up the masts, to furl or unfurl sails on yards that sway dizzyingly over the deck, to tie a dozen different knots until your fingers ache, to haul on any rope you're told to haul on. The language is foreign, sheets control the sails, halyards hoist them, braces swing the yards. The deck is not a floor, it's the deck. The kitchen is the galley, the toilet is the head, a terrifying open platform at the very bow of the ship. Left is port, and right is starboard. Getting any of this wrong earns you a sharp correction, or worse, the silent, scornful pity of the veteran sailors. You discover the ship's economy. Wages are meager and paid at the end of the voyage, but a small, vibrant black market operates on tobacco, sugar, and better quality tea. The ship's boys, the lowest of the low, are your primary source of gossip and runners of small errands. One of them, a sharp-eyed lad named Pip, shows you a surprising detail. Hidden behind a loose plank in the forecastle is a small, communal library. It's not official. It's a collection of tattered, salt-stained novels, a book on celestial navigation, a volume of poetry, and a well-thumbed copy of the Ladies' Magazine from 1839. This illicit treasure trove, maintained and contributed to by generations of sailors, is your first glimpse into the crew's quiet rebellion against mind-numbing monotony. It's a small island of shared intellect in a sea of brute labor. The social order is as rigid as the ship's timbers. The captain is a distant, absolute monarch. The mates are his enforcers. The skilled men, the sailmaker, the carpenter, the boatswain, are the aristocracy, afforded a wary respect. And then there's you and the other able seamen, the commoners. Historians still argue whether the brutal discipline of a ship like this was a necessary evil for collective survival or simply a floating mirror of the oppressive class structures of Victorian England. The line is fine. You witness a man being put in irons, leg chains, for refusing an order during a sail change. The punishment is severe, public, and efficient. It casts a pall over the ship for a day. But you also see the same captain quietly double the lime juice ration when the first signs of a cough sweep through the forecastle. His authority is not just about fear. It's about being the sole guardian of over 100 lives in a profoundly hostile environment. Days blur into a routine of toil, watch, and short, hard sleep. You grow accustomed to the constant damp, to the way everything you own feels slightly sticky with salt. You learn to sleep through the cacophony of the ship, the groan of timber, the thunder of feet on deck above, the shouted orders. The Liberty is no longer a place you are on. She is a creature you are inside of, and you are learning her heartbeat, her breath, her moods. The English Channel is behind you. The Western approaches loom. And with them comes the first true test of your new home, and your place within it. The air grows colder, the waves have a longer, deeper roll. The sailors cast knowing glances to windward and speak in lower tones. You are heading for the Bay of Biscay. The change is felt before it is seen. The long, oily swells of the Atlantic approaches sharpen into steep, marching hills of water. The color of the sea shifts from a leaden gray to a bruised, greenish black. The wind, which had been a steady companion at your back, becomes a shrieking, unpredictable foe, clawing at the rigging with a sound like tormented ghosts. You have entered the Bay of Biscay, a vast gulf between France and Spain that has served as the graveyard for countless ships and the inaugural vomitorium for countless more sailors. The Liberty's gentle, living motion becomes a violent, discordant lurch. One moment you are climbing a liquid mountain, the bow rising until all you see is a wall of water and sky. The next, you are plummeting into a trough, with walls of water on all sides and a terrifying glimpse of the next oncoming peak. Your body rebels before your mind can fully register the danger. The queasiness you felt in the channel was a polite suggestion. This is a full-scale, visceral insurrection. Your stomach, no longer content with mere complaints, decides to evacuate its contents with extreme prejudice. You are not alone. The lee rail, the side of the ship away from the wind, becomes a communal altar of misery, lined with green-faced men heaving into the frothing sea. The experienced sailors move among you, not with sympathy, but with a brisk practicality. "Get it over the side, lad, not on the deck," one growls, shoving a bucket into your hands. "And if you can't hold your guts, at least hold your watch." The humor is as dark as the water. This is not a storm, not yet. This is simply the Bay of Biscay introducing itself. The ship's work does not stop. It becomes a desperate, wet ballet of survival. You are ordered aloft with the others to reef the sails, to reduce their area by tying down part of the canvas. Climbing the ratlins is no longer a matter of strength but of pure, white-knuckled will. The mast describes great arcs in the sky, whipping you back and forth like a metronome's pendulum. Rain and spray sting your face like needles. You cling to the ropes, frozen for a moment, staring down at the deck that looks like a postage stamp far below, seesawing crazily. A veteran sailor, his face a roadmap of old scars and squint lines, yells in your ear, "Don't look down. Look at the job. One hand for the ship, one for yourself." You fumble with the stiff, rain-soaked canvas, your numb fingers tying the reef points as you've been taught, the wind trying to tear the heavy cloth from your grip. Back on deck, awash with swirling water, you learn the meaning of waterproof. Nothing is. Your oilskin jacket and sou'wester hat keep the worst of the sea out, but within minutes you are soaked to the skin with a combination of cold sweat, condensation, and inevitable leaks. The world shrinks to the few feet of slippery deck in front of you. Time distorts. A 4-hour watch feels like an eternity of shuddering cold and deafening noise. The only constants are the mad orchestra of the storm, The scream of the wind in the rigging, the deep-throated boom as the bow punches into a wave, the frantic gurgle of water in the scuppers, and the taut, focused presence of Captain Finch on the quarterdeck. He is lashed to a binnacle post near the ship's wheel, his eyes scanning the sea, the sails, the barometer. He doesn't shout. He gives orders to the helmsman and the mate in a calm, clipped voice that somehow cuts through the din. His calm is not reassuring, it is terrifying. It means the situation is bad, but it is within the parameters of what a master mariner expects and can manage. You see him make a subtle gesture, and the ship's course changes a few degrees, presenting her side more to the waves to ride them better. This is the art of it, not fighting the ocean, but dancing with it, conceding here to gain an advantage there. In the fleeting moments of respite below, the forecastle is a scene of damp wretchedness. Hammocks swing in wild, nausea-inducing parabolas. The air is thick with the smell of wet wall, vomit, and the sour reek of the bilge, which has been stirred into pungent life by the ship's violent motion. Hot food is impossible. You gnaw on hardtack and a piece of cold salt pork, if you can stomach it. Sleep is a frantic, shallow thing, constantly broken by the crash of a larger wave or the shout for all hands on deck. You learn to wedge yourself into your hammock with a rolled blanket, a human cargo strap. After 36 hours, as suddenly as it intensified, the fury begins to abate. The wind drops from a scream to a howl, then to a moan. The waves, though still immense, lose their jagged, breaking crests. The cloud ceiling lifts from a oppressive blanket to a ragged, fast-moving tapestry of gray and white. Exhaustion hits you like a physical blow. Every muscle aches from bracing against the motion. Your hands are raw, your face chapped and salt-burned. But you are still here. The Liberty is still here. She has taken on water, the pumps are clanking away, manned by a weary crew, and some minor damage aloft, but she is intact. As you stand your next watch in the fading gale, you look at the ship and the men around you with new eyes. The Bay of Biscay has performed a brutal but effective rite of passage. You are no longer just a body on a ship. You are part of the crew that weathered it. You understand, in your bones, the shared language of glances between the sailors, the deep, weary pride in their posture. You haven't just survived bad weather, you've been processed by one of the ocean's great filtering mechanisms. The land-loving part of you has been violently stripped away, leaving something harder, saltier, more resilient. As the first weak shaft of sunlight breaks through the clouds, painting the heaving sea in an improbable, beautiful gold, the mate claps you on the shoulder, a brief, solid impact. "Biscay spit us out," he says, his voice hoarse. "Now for the real sailing." Ahead lies the wide, sun-blasted expanse of the Atlantic proper, and the promise of the trade winds. You are, for better or worse, a sailor. The violence of the bay is replaced by a vast, patient monotony. The Liberty, her wounds from the gale quickly spliced and stitched by the carpenter and sailmaker, settles into the long, rhythmic stride of the open Atlantic. The wind, having spent its northern fury, transforms into a steady, reliable push from the northeast. These are the fabled trade winds, the planetary conveyor belt that carried empires to the New World and now carries you toward the southern hemisphere. The ship heels over to a constant, gentle angle, her lee rail dipping close to the water, and she begins to run. The hiss of her wake becomes a permanent soundtrack, a white, foaming road stretching all the way back to the world you've left behind. The heat arrives. It is not the damp heat of London, but a dry, searing brilliance that pours from a sky of impossible blue, reflects off the metallic sea, and bakes the deck planking until they're almost too hot to touch barefoot. Your world becomes defined by the pursuit of shade and the precious commodity of fresh water. Each man's daily ration is a strict gallon, for drinking, cooking, and, sparingly, washing. You learn to savor each sip, to use a damp cloth to wipe the salt grit from your face rather than pour water over it. The crew's uniform shifts. Heavy jumpers and oilskins are stowed. Men work in ragged trousers, often bare-chested, their skins tanning to a deep, cured leather. The officers, maintaining decorum, swelter in thin cotton shirts. The ship's routine hardens into a religion. Your days are marked by the bells that ring every half hour, marking the watch. The work is constant but less frantic. Trimming sails to catch the most efficient angle of wind, repairing chafed lines, holestoning the decks each morning with sand and seawater until the wood is pale and smooth. It is mind-numbing, physical poetry. You develop the sailor's gait, a slight, rolling stoop, feet always wide for balance. You learn to tie knots in your sleep, your hands moving by muscle memory. The community of the forecastle becomes your entire social sphere. Stories are told, tall tales of sea serpents and mermaids, and more practical, gritty anecdotes about ports and women and fights. A sailor named Davies, who lost 2 toes to frostbite off Newfoundland, teaches you how to properly sew a patch on your trousers, the needle flashing in the sun. Boredom becomes an enemy as potent as any storm. To combat it, small rituals and competitions emerge. There are knot tying races, with the loser having to clean the head for a day. Men carve intricate scrimshaw on spare pieces of whalebone or wood, a surprisingly common pastime, turning the detritus of maritime industry into folk art. One afternoon, a spontaneous fishing contest begins. Lines are cast from the stern, baited with scraps of salt pork. The catch is a thrilling diversion, gleaming, iridescent dorado that fight with spectacular leaps, their colors dying as they hit the deck. That night, the cook, in a rare fit of generosity, fries the fresh meat in a little precious lard. It is a taste so vivid, so unlike the cured and boiled monotony of your rations, it feels like a celestial banquet. Amid this sun-drenched grind, you are introduced to the ship's more refined, and slightly absurd, side. Dr. Alderton, the young surgeon, decides to give a series of improving lectures during the dog watch, the period of leisure between 4 and 6 p.m. Gathered on the foredeck, you and a dozen other men listen as he explains, with great earnestness, the principles of celestial navigation. He holds up a sextant, its brass winking in the sun. By measuring the angle of the sun at its zenith, gentlemen, we can determine our latitude with astonishing accuracy, he declares. It is a widely accepted historical fact that this technology, along with reliable marine chronometers for longitude, had transformed ocean travel from a game of chance into a calculable science. You half listen, more captivated by the instrument itself than the theory. The real navigation, you know, is happening above you, where Captain Finch and the mate take their own daily sights, their quiet conference over charts being the true brain of the voyage. But Dr. Alderton also reveals a lesser-known, quietly desperate aspect of shipboard life. In his small sickbay, alongside his lancets and bone saws, he keeps a ledger. It is not just for medical notes. It is a meticulous record of dreams. He asks men, when they come to him with minor ailments, to describe any vivid dreams they've had. At first, they think he's mad. But he explains, in his soft voice, that on such long voyages, dreams become a shared currency, a reflection of collective hope and fear. He records dreams of green fields, of specific pubs in Portsmouth, of mothers and wives. He once tells you, confidingly, last week, 3 separate men dreamed of finding a fresh apple tree growing on a tropical island. Not eating the apples, mind you. Just standing under it. He sees these recurring motifs as diagnostic tools for the crew's mental state, a primitive psychology of confinement. Historians still argue whether such prolonged isolation and sensory deprivation bred a unique, collective maritime consciousness or simply amplified the individual neuroses the men brought aboard. The days stretch, marked by the sun's passage and the subtle changes in the sea. The water takes on a deeper, purer blue. Flying fish, like escaped shards of silver glass, skitter across the wave tops, sometimes landing flapping on the deck, providing a lucky snack. The nights are a revelation. With no land for 1,000 miles to pollute the darkness, the sky is a staggering, overwhelming spill of stars. The Milky Way is a thick, luminous river. You learn new constellations. The Southern Cross, a faint but distinct kite shape, begins to peep above the horizon ahead, your first celestial confirmation that you are leaving your old world behind. Lying on the deck during a quiet watch, the ship a dark ghost beneath you, you feel a profound and unsettling awe. You are a speck on an infinite black plain, guided by the same pinpricks of light that guided the Phoenicians and the Polynesians. The immense, empty beauty of it is a kind of quiet terror. The trade winds blow on, the Liberty surges south, and the equator draws nearer, bringing with it the promise of ritual and chaos. The approach is announced not by a line on a chart, but by a shift in the crew's atmosphere. A suppressed, fizzing energy replaces the sun-drowsed routine. The veterans begin to smile in a way that shows a lot of teeth but doesn't touch their eyes. Whispers travel the deck, and you see men assembling odd items. Buckets, pots of grease, ragged costumes made from old sailcloth and rope. The temperature soars into a stifling, breathless heat, the air so thick with moisture it feels like swimming. The sea tones a flat, oily calm, a deep indigo mirror reflecting the brutal sun. You are in the doldrums, the belt of calm around the equator, and the Liberty's progress slows to a gentle drift. The sails hang limp, occasionally flapping with a sound like a bored giant sighing. This stillness is the prelude. The ceremony, you learn, is called crossing the line. No sailor who has never crossed the equator, a pollywog or a slimy, may do so without being initiated into the ancient order of the deep by those who have, the shellbacks. It is a tradition older than the Royal Navy itself, a piece of sanctioned anarchy. The shellbacks, led by the oldest able seaman, a gnarled Scot named MacDonald who claims to have crossed the line 17 times, sequester themselves for a day of planning. Their laughter carries an ominous edge. The event begins at noon. The ship's bell is rung in an urgent, irregular rhythm. King Neptune and his royal court emerge from the forecastle. MacDonald is Neptune, his beard whitened with flour, a crown of rope and seashells on his head, a trident fashioned from a harpoon shaft in his hand. His queen, a hulking sailmaker named Barnes squeezed into a ludicrous dress of canvas and streamers, minces beside him. They are followed by bays, men daubed with tar and wearing shaggy wigs of oakum, and a barber wielding a giant wooden razor. All pollywogs, you included, are summoned to the main deck. The atmosphere is a bizarre mix of carnival and tribunal. Captain Finch and the officers observe from the poop deck, officially aloof but with clear amusement. The law of the ship is temporarily suspended. The law of the shellbacks reigns. Neptune, in a booming, theatrical voice, reads an absurd list of charges against you for the crime of intruding upon his domain without paying homage. The sentence is always the same: purification. What follows is a chaotic, wet, and gleefully humiliating ritual. You are forced to kiss the baby, a tar-covered object of dubious origin. You are lathered with a foul, greasy mixture of soap, tar, and whatever else was handy, then shaved with the not very blunt wooden razor, which mostly just smears the gunk around. Then comes the central ordeal, the plank. A board is extended over a large sail that has been rigged into a pool and filled with seawater. Blindfolded, you are made to walk it. You take 3 steps before a hand shoves you squarely in the chest. You plunge into the shockingly cold, briny pool, where the bears dunk you thoroughly before hauling you, spluttering and gasping, back out. You are then presented to Neptune, who dubs you a trusty shellback, and offers you a sip of Neptune's nectar from a battered tin cup. It tastes suspiciously like the ship's vinegar cut with rum. Dripping, stinking of grease and seawater, your dignity in tatters, you are welcomed into the fraternity with a rough, backslapping hug from the very man who pushed you in. And just like that, it's over. You are transformed. The tension evaporates. The shellbacks, their roles shed, become your mates again, laughing with you now, not at you. The buckets of clean seawater are brought up to rinse off the worst of the muck, and a special ration of rum, the real, good stuff, is issued to all hands by order of the captain. That night, as the Liberty still rests on the glassy sea, the mood is one of exhausted camaraderie. The ceremony, for all its childish brutality, served a profound purpose. Historians still argue whether these maritime rituals were primarily about reinforcing hierarchy, the old salts over the new, a superstitious appeasement of the sea gods, or a vital pressure valve for men living in crushing proximity. Watching the shellbacks and former polywogs now sharing their rum ration, singing the same shanties with equal fervor, you feel the truth is the latter. The shade ordeal, the controlled madness, has burned away the last residues of the land-based social order you brought aboard. A clerk from London and a farmhand from Yorkshire have been equally covered in tar and dunked in seawater. You are no longer individuals defined by your pasts. You are shellbacks, defined by the line you've crossed together. The ceremony also reveals the ship's hidden economy of humor. You discover that a key, lesser-known detail of the ritual was the careful, behind-the-scenes management by the officers. Dr. Alderton had discreetly inspected the pool for any dangerous debris. The boatswain had ensured the plank was secure and not too high. Even the foul grease was a specific recipe meant to be disgusting but not caustic. It was anarchy with a safety net, chaos choreographed by men who knew the thin line between morale building and mutiny. As the stars blaze overhead, a faint breath of wind stirs, filling the limp sails with a soft, hopeful rustle. The doldrums are releasing their grip. The trade winds of the southern hemisphere are waiting to take you up, to fill the canvas and send the Liberty speeding eastward. You lie on the deck, your hair still stiff with salt, your skin tingling. You look up at the Southern Cross, now clearer and higher in the sky. You have been broken down and remade, not by the storm's violence, but by the crew's ritual. You have paid your tribute to Neptune. The vast, empty Southern Ocean lies ahead, and you are now, irrevocably, a part of it. The southern trade winds are a different beast. They lack the steady, predictable push of their northern cousins. They are cooler, stronger, and carry a hint of icebergs in their breath, even here in the temperate latitudes. The Liberty, now a ship of shellbacks, bends to this new force and begins a long, curving sprint southeast, her lee rail buried in the foam, driving toward the most feared cape on the planet. The talk in the forecastle turns from rituals to legends. They speak in lowered tones of the Cape of Storms, its Portuguese name, or the more commercially optimistic Cape of Good Hope, bestowed by a hopeful king. But the sailors know its true name is written in wreckage and drowned men. Days are spent in meticulous preparation. Every piece of rigging is checked and double-checked. Storm canvas, heavier, tougher sailcloth, is brought up from the hold and bent onto the yards, ready to be swapped in a moment's notice. The carpenter and his mates ensure every hatch combing is sound, every pump leather supple and functional. Captain Finch spends hours in his cabin with his charts and barometer, plotting the optimal approach. The goal is not to round the cape, but to slip past it, using the prevailing winds and currents like a thief using shadows. The first sign is the water. The deep, pure blue of the tropics gives way to a colder, greener, more turbulent hue. The air grows chill, a damp cold that seeps through your layers. Albatrosses appear, creatures of mythic grace with wingspans wider than 2 tall men. They glide alongside the ship for hours, never seeming to flap, riding the air currents generated by the Liberty's passage. They are beautiful, but their presence is an omen. You are in the domain of the roaring 40s, even if you're still north of them. Then, the cape itself emerges from a bank of low cloud on the port bow. It is not a dramatic, jagged peak as you'd imagined, but a great, brooding, dun-colored hump of land, shrouded in mist, against which the South Atlantic hurls itself in an endless, explosive rage. Even from miles out, you can see and hear the fury. Waves that have traveled unimpeded for thousands of miles rise into cliffs of water that detonate against the cliffs in geysers of white spray that hang in the air like ghosts. The sound is a continuous, basso profundo roar, a reminder of the planet's raw power. The Liberty does not charge directly at this chaos. Captain Finch orders a course that takes you well out to sea, giving the cape a wide, respectful bow. The art now is in reading the confused seas where the Atlantic meets the Indian Ocean. The ship begins to buck and twist in a cross-swell, waves coming from 2, sometimes 3 directions at once. It is nauseating, unsettling work. You are aloft again, securing everything that could possibly move. From the masthead, the view is terrifyingly majestic. The angry cape to leeward, the endless, heaving ocean to windward, and your tiny wooden world fighting to find a path between them. For 48 hours, the dance is relentless. The wind screams in the rigging, a constant, high-pitched keen. The ship is driven hard, but under tightly reefed sails, her speed controlled. Every man is on edge, sleep snatched in brief, fully clothed moments. Meals are gulped standing up, braced against a bulkhead. The officers' faces are drawn, their eyes permanently fixed aloft and to windward. This is where you witness the quiet professionalism that separates a successful packet ship from a statistic. A staysail begins to tear, the canvas cracking like gunfire. Within minutes, the watch is aloft, battling the wind to haul it down and secure it, while the sailmaker's team on deck already has needles and palm guards out, ready to repower it the moment it hits the planks. It is here you learn a surprising, slightly absurd historical detail about this perilous passage. Among the items in the ship's medicine chest, specifically noted in Dr. Alderton's log for use in high southern latitudes, is a supply of mustard poultices. But they aren't for chest colds. The violent, irregular motion of rounding the cape, combined with the constant tension and cold, leads to an epidemic of severe back strains among the crew. The mustard plaster, applied to the lower back, was the 19th century sailor's answer to a pulled muscle, its fiery heat a counter-irritant to the deep ache of heaving on lines in a buckling ship. You see 2 men receiving this treatment in the forecastle, grinning through gritted teeth as the poultice does its work, calling it the Cape Kiss. Historians still argue whether the terror of Cape Horn to the south was objectively worse for sailing ships, or whether the Cape of Good Hope's reputation was cemented by its position as the first great barrier on the immensely lucrative eastern trade routes, making its toll of ships and lives more historically visible. As you cling to the rail, watching the distant cape slowly, imperceptibly, begin to fall astern, you have no doubt about its power. It is a place that demands everything, every ounce of skill, every scrap of endurance, every bit of the ship's strength. And then, almost as suddenly as the turmoil began, it eases. The cross swells smooth into a great, regular march from the west. The wind, still strong, settles into a consistent direction. The cloud over the cape recedes, a last fist of mist shaking itself at you. The albatrosses will once more and peel away, their escort duty done. You have passed it. You are now in the Indian Ocean, or rather, its cold, southern fringe. The deck exhales. Men smile, genuine this time. The captain orders the reefs shaken out of the topsails, and the Liberty, like a horse given its head after a treacherous ford, surges forward with renewed purpose. The cape is behind you, a defeated sentinel. Ahead lies the greatest, emptiest, fastest highway of water on Earth, the Roaring Forties. The transformation is immediate and profound. With the Cape's shadow lifted, the Liberty seems to shake herself like a dog after a bath and find her true stride. The wind, now unhindered by any continent, howls unimpeded from the west, a constant, powerful stream flowing around the bottom of the world. These are the Roaring Forties, named for the latitudinal band you are now riding, and they live up to their name with a glorious, terrifying fury. The ship is no longer sailing, she is flying. With every stitch of canvas set, topgallants, royals, studding sails boomed out on either side like wings, she heels over until the lee rail is continuously buried in a hissing boil of white water. The speed is a physical sensation, a deep hum in the deck planking that travels up your spine. Your world becomes a study in angles and damp. Everything is canted. You walk perpetually uphill to windward, or skitter precariously downhill to leeward. The air is cold, saturated with spray that flies over the deck in great, stinging sheets, leaving a rime of salt on every surface, every eyelash, every lip. You are constantly wet, but it's a cold, energetic wetness, unlike the sweaty damp of the tropics. The sea is a monochrome spectacle, vast, grey, and heaving with long, powerful rollers that the Liberty rides up and swoops down with the grace of a seabird. There is no land here, not even the rumor of it. You are in one of the most remote places on Earth, and the sheer, empty scale of it is both liberating and deeply lonely. The work shifts in character. It is no longer about finesse but about brute strength and steadfast nerve. The primary task is steering. The helmsman, 2 men at a time in this weather, fights the massive, kicking wheel to hold the ship on a course a few points north of due east. Let her fall off too much, and you risk a catastrophic broach, being swung broadside to these immense waves. Let her come up too much, and you risk being taken aback, with the wind hitting the front of the sails and potentially shredding them or pushing the ship backwards into a trough. It is exhausting, muscle-burning work, and you take your turn, your arms vibrating with the strain of controlling 200 tons of wooden canvas driven by a planetary gale. Life becomes a series of damp chores between watches. You chip ice from the freshwater casks on deck. The cold nights freeze the standing water. You stand watch, trust in every scrap of clothing you own, peering into a murk of spray and sleet for the 1 in a million chance of sighting another ship, or, more ominously, an iceberg. The fear of ice is a low, constant hum in the background. You hear tales of ships that met floating mountains of it in these latitudes, their ends swift and silent. But the speed is addictive. The log line, cast from the stern every hour, shows runs of 12, 13, once even 14 knots. For a wooden sailing ship, this is blistering, thrilling progress. Each noon, when the mate calls out the day's run calculated from the chips of wood tossed overboard, a cheer goes up. You are consuming longitude. In this monochrome, fast-moving world, small things assume profound significance. The daily issue of Bagoo, a hot porridge of oatmeal and molasses, becomes a cherished moment of warmth. A dry pair of socks, warmed for a few minutes by the galley stove, is a luxury akin to a king's ransom. The company in the forecastle grows closer, the conversations quieter, more reflective. The shared ordeal of the cold and the speed forges a silent bond. You play endless games of drafts on a salt-crusted board, the pieces sliding with the ship's roll. It is during this period that you witness the ship's more refined scientific side, a widely accepted historical practice that feels almost absurd in this violent setting. Despite the conditions, the officers continue their meteorological and oceanographic observations. The mate, wrapped in oilskins, braves the spray on the quarterdeck to take seawater temperature readings with a special thermometer lowered over the side in a bucket. He records the specific gravity of the water, the air pressure, the wind direction and force. This data, meticulously logged, is part of a growing global effort to understand ocean currents and weather patterns. In the middle of this roaring emptiness, you are a tiny, moving data point in the infancy of climate science. One afternoon, during a brief lull where the wind drops from a roar to a mere shout, a cry goes up from the masthead, "Whale ho!" to leeward. You rush to the rail. Not one, but a pod of great, sleek, black and white whales is surfing the massive swells alongside the ship, their curved dorsal fins slicing the water, their breath pluming in the cold air. They are killer whales, or orcas. They keep pace with the Liberty effortlessly, diving under her bow and surfacing ahead, as if assessing her. They play. For a full 20 minutes, these powerful, intelligent creatures escort you, a moment of wild, living beauty in the grey expanse. Historians still argue whether such encounters were seen by superstitious sailors as omens of good luck or impending disaster. But for you and the men lining the rail, it is neither. It is a gift, a reminder that this empty ocean is teeming with a life entirely indifferent to your human journey, a life that is both majestic and utterly alien. Then, as if on a signal, the whales sound, their great flukes rising and slipping into the deep. The wind rediscovers its fury, and the Liberty buries her shoulder in the next wave, spray exploding over the bow. The moment of wonder is past, replaced once more by the demanding, exhilarating grind of the chase. You are flying east, carried on the breath of the planet itself, the days blurring into one another in a rush of water, wind, and speed. Somewhere far to the north, beyond the curve of the earth, lies the coast of a continent you have never seen. For now, you are a citizen of the wind and the wide, wild southern sea. The change, when it comes, is not in the sea or the sky, but in the life upon it. For weeks, your only companions have been albatrosses and the occasional whale. Then, one morning, a new scent threads itself into the cold, salt air, a dense, complicated perfume of damp earth, leaf mold, and something sweetly vegetal, like crushed eucalyptus. The color of the water shifts from deep ocean gray to a greenish coastal hue. Flotsam appears, stray leaves, bits of bark, a solitary, battered tree branch. And then, a cry from the masthead that sends a jolt through the entire crew. Land ho! Dead ahead. It is not the mainland. It is a jagged, dark line on the horizon, a serrated edge of blue-gray against the softer gray of the sky. This is Van Diemen's Land, the island at the end of the world. The Liberty's course bends north, following the wild, lee shore. For a day, you sail past a coastline of profound, forbidding beauty, sheer dolerite cliffs stained white with seabird guano, deep, shadowy coves, and mountains cloaked in a strange, somber green forest that looks untouched since the dawn of time. The wind funneling through the channels becomes fluky, unpredictable. The crew's mood is one of focused tension. Land, after so long, is not a friend. It is a lee shore, a danger to be respected. Finally, you turn into a broad, sheltered estuary, the Derwent River. The motion of the ship ceases almost entirely, replaced by a gentle, riverine rock. The silence is startling, broken only by the lap of water and the distant, eerie call of birds you cannot name. The land closes in on both sides, green and steep. And then, around a bend, Hobart Town reveals itself. It is a shock to the system. After the minimalist palette of the ocean, the settlement is a jumble of raw color and crude geometry. Low, weatherboard houses and stone warehouses cluster along the waterfront, their shingle roofs a mix of mossy green and new, blonde wood. Behind them, on the slopes, you can see the unmistakable, grim barracks of the penal settlement. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, sawn timber, and something else, the faint, unmistakable scent of human confinement. The waterfront is a hive of activity, but of a different order than London's. There are fewer ships, and the people moving on the wharves are a study in contrasts. Red-coated soldiers moving with bored authority, groups of men in drab, grey convict garb heaving sacks under the watchful eye of overseers, and free settlers in rough, practical clothing. Aboriginal people, in possum skin cloaks, observe the commotion from a distance, their presence a silent, powerful reminder of a world that existed long before this penal outpost. The Liberty glides to a mooring at the Queen's Wharf. The sense of arrival is profound, but anticlimactic. You are not here for liberty. You are here for the mail. The moment the lines are secure, a detachment of soldiers marches aboard, led by a stone-faced lieutenant. The sacred mail bags, those oilskin-wrapped parcels you loaded in London a lifetime ago, are brought up from the hold with a reverence usually reserved for religious relics. A receipt is signed with great formality between Captain Finch and the port commandant. This is the moment the entire voyage has been building toward. The connection between the Empire's heart and its farthest, darkest pulse is made physical. You have a few hours of shore leave, in shifts. Stepping onto the solid, unmoving wharf feels alien. Your legs, conditioned to constant motion, feel wobbly, as if the ground itself is pitching. They call it sea legs, and losing them is a disorienting experience. You walk up the muddy main street, Macquarie Street, gaping at the raw newness of everything. The buildings are simple, functional, some barely finished. But there are signs of a society trying to root itself. A modest stone church, a rudimentary inn with a sign creaking in the wind, a few shops selling basic supplies at astronomical prices. The people you pass look you over with the assessing eyes of those starved for news. You, in your salt-stained sailor's gear, are a walking telegram from the world. You learn a surprising, darkly amusing detail about this remote port. Due to the chronic shortage of currency in the colony, a significant amount of local commerce is conducted using a system of personal IOUs and promissory notes. But for smaller, everyday transactions, they use a peculiar substitute, rum. Not as a drink, but as a literal currency. A pint of rum might buy you a haircut, 2 pints might settle a debt for a pair of boots. The colony, you realize, runs on a hydraulic system of alcoholic liquidity. You see it happen outside a chandler's shop, where a sailor from another vessel pays for a new belt with a small, corked bottle, received with a nod as serious as if it were a gold sovereign. Historians still argue whether penal colonies like Hobart were primarily effective as deterrents, as engines of colonial development through forced labor, or simply as a brutal form of exile that exported Britain's social problems. Walking past a chain gang of hollow-eyed men breaking stones under the watchful muskets of guards, the question feels less academic. This is a town built on punishment, and the weight of it hangs in the cold Tasmanian air. Your time ashore is brief. You purchase a small, local newspaper, the Hobart Town Courier, its pages filled with land auctions, reports on convict assignments, and shipping news. It feels bizarre to hold newsprint in your hands again. You buy a twist of real tobacco with some of your scant pay, savoring its rich, earthy smell. Then, as the short afternoon begins to wane, you make your way back to the wharf. The Liberty looks small and tired against the imposing backdrop of Mount Wellington looming over the town. She has disgorged her precious letters. Some of those bundles have already been carried by guards up to the prison, where they will represent the only shred of humanity for men serving life sentences. You climb back aboard. The smell of the land, of soil and smoke and freedom and imprisonment, clings to your clothes. It's a complex perfume, and as the lines are cast off and the Liberty is towed back into the Derwent to catch the evening breeze, you carry it with you, a stark reminder that the world you are sailing to connect is far more complicated than the simple, elemental struggle of ship versus sea. The Liberty turns her bow north, leaving the deep, cold fjords of Van Diemen's Land for the more open, but no less treacherous, Tasman Sea. The wind, now on your beam, pushes you briskly along the eastern coast of the continent. This is the final leg. The knowledge of it colors everything with a strange, impatient energy. The destination is no longer a mythical Southland. It is a specific harbor on every chart: Port Jackson, Sydney Cove. The cruise talk turns from surviving storms to the prospects of shore leave in a proper colonial town. Bets are placed on the exact day and hour of landfall. For a week, you sail within sight of a coastline that is both magnificent and strangely empty. To port, an endless procession of yellow sand beaches, dramatic headlands, and, behind them, a blue-misted range of mountains running north like a spine. There are no towns, no lights at night, no signs of human habitation at all for days on end. It is a pristine, ancient landscape that seems to pay no heed to your passage. The sea here is a vibrant, shifting blue, and the air warms perceptibly each day, carrying the faint, dry, peppery scent of the Australian bush, a smell of sun-baked earth, gum leaves, and distant fires. The routine of shipboard life continues, but with a lighter touch. The watches are less arduous, the mood more anticipatory. Even Captain Finch seems to relax a fraction, spending more time on deck with his telescope trained on the coast, noting landmarks: Cape Howe, Jarvis Bay, the towering bulk of Mount Dromedary. The navigation here is precise and critical. The coast is a lee shore, and a missed calculation could put you on a reef with no hope of rescue. You take your turn at the lead line, heaving the weighted rope forward to call out the depth in fathoms. By the mark, 7. Your voice joining the ancient chant of coastal pilots. Then, on a brilliant morning with the sun glinting off a sea of sapphire, the cry comes, "Heads ahead." You rush to the bow. On the horizon, two great, rugged sandstone bluffs stand sentinel, guarding a narrow entrance. This is the gateway, the heads of Port Jackson. As you approach, the scale becomes apparent. The cliffs are massive, weathered, topped with wind-sculpted trees. The entrance looks impossibly tight for a ship of the Liberty's size. A pilot boat, a lean cutter with a tan sail, skims out from a hidden cove and comes alongside. A weather-beaten man in a blue jacket scrambles aboard, nods to the captain, and takes his place by the wheel. The ship is now under his command. The passage through the heads is a moment of held breath. The surge of the open sea funnels through the gap, making the water boil and swirl. You can see rocks and small, desperate beaches on either side, frighteningly close. The pilot issues quiet, steady commands. The Liberty, responsive and light now that her holds are empty of everything but ballast and a few remaining stores, heels slightly and slips through the jaws of stone. And then, the world opens up. Sydney Harbour reveals itself not as a mere port, but as a breathtaking, labyrinthine masterpiece of nature. It is a sprawling aquatic park of coves, inlets, and tree-lined points, the water a startling, clear aquamarine. The scale is disorienting. After months of empty horizons, you are now surrounded by land on all sides, but a land that is all bays and headlands, dotted with islands. The first signs of the colony are the smells. The tang of sawn timber, the acrid bite of lime kilns, the ubiquitous wood smoke, and beneath it all, the rich, loamy scent of disturbed earth. And then you see the settlement itself, cradled in a deep south-facing cove. Sydney. It is not a city, not by London standards, but it is immeasurably more substantial and chaotic than Hobart. Stone buildings with shingle roofs cluster around the waterfront, alongside hundreds of simpler wooden structures. Wharves and jetties finger out into the water, a forest of masts sprouting from them. There is noise, the clang of a blacksmith, the shouts of carters, the bleating of sheep from a holding pen on the shore. The hills behind the town are patchy with cleared land, dotted with whitewashed cottages and crisscrossed by raw, red dirt roads. It is messy, vibrant, loud, and growing before your very eyes. The Liberty glides past the small, rocky island of Pinchgut with its half-built fort, and into Sydney Cove proper. The anchor is let go with a thunderous roar of chain, the sound echoing off the surrounding hills. The voyage is over. You have arrived. The sense of culmination is immense, but it is quickly subsumed by a whirlwind of activity. Customs officials and the colonial postmaster come aboard with even more ceremony than in Hobart. The remaining mail sacks, the ones for New South Wales, are handed over. But now, the process works in reverse. News from the colony is gathered. Dispatches from the governor, letters from settlers, commercial reports. And the Liberty must take on cargo for the return voyage. You look at the bustling shore, at the strange trees, gums with pale, peeling bark and narrow leaves, and at the mix of people, soldiers in bright red, well-dressed merchants, laborers in slouch hats, and again, groups of Aboriginal people watching from the fringes with an inscrutable calm. You have crossed the world. The paper in those mail sacks you carried is already changing lives. A letter granting a pardon here, a notice of an inheritance there, news of a death, a birth, a war. You are not just a sailor who has completed a long trip. You are a synapse that has fired, connecting one hemisphere of the British brain to the other. The journey is done, but the Liberty's work is only half complete. The anchor is down, but the work is just beginning. For the crew of the Liberty, Sydney is not a destination for repose, but a frantic, days-long hub of logistical reversal. The ship, having disgorged the spiritual cargo of the mail, must now be filled with the physical bounty of the colony. Her empty hold, which for months echoed with the shift of ballast stones, becomes a target for every merchant and agent in the cove. Lighters, broad, flat-bottomed barges, cluster around her like piglets at a sow, and the business of loading begins. You witness, firsthand, the economic reality of this distant outpost. The primary export, the thing that will pay for the Liberty's voyage and turn a profit for her owners in London, is wool. Great, greasy, tightly packed bales of it, each one stamped with the brand of an inland station you can scarcely imagine. They are heavy, cumbersome, and smell profoundly of lanolin and the wide, open pastures. You heave them aboard, your back protesting, stacking them deep in the hold in a precise, geometric puzzle overseen by the mate. This is the colony's gold. This wool will become cloth on the looms of Yorkshire, and its sale will fund the import of all the manufactured goods you saw being unloaded in Hobart. The economy is a simple, tangible loop, and you are the muscle closing the circuit. But it's not just wool. There are other, odder treasures. Cases of whale oil, rendered down from the southern right whales hunted in the Tasman Sea, fill the air with a fishy, combustible smell. There are barrels of exotic, dark hardwood, a timber called blackbutt, for fine furniture. There are casks of colonial wine, a rough, potent vintage from the Parramatta region. And then there are the private consignments, the colonial dreams packed in crates, samples of copper ore from newly discovered seams, bundles of kangaroo skins, a box of carefully packed bird of paradise feathers, and even a small, securely crated collection of pressed native flowers and seeds destined for the Royal Botanical Gardens at Kew. This is not just cargo. It is evidence, samples of a continent being catalogued and commodified. Amidst this physical labor, you see the other, more subtle cargo being loaded: information. The ship's clerk is besieged on deck. Colonial newspapers, government gazettes, personal letters from settlers to their families back home, and the official dispatches from the governor to the colonial office are all carefully logged, sealed, and stowed in the captain's cabin. This is the return mail, just as vital as what you brought. It carries not just news, but tone, reports on crop yields, requests for more convict labor or fewer, tales of exploration, complaints about supply. The social and political shape of the colony will be molded by how these documents are received in Whitehall. Historians still argue whether the lag in communication, these months between sending a dispatch and receiving a reply, made colonial governors more autonomous and powerful, or simply rendered them perpetually out of step and frustrated. The loading is a spectacle that draws a crowd. From the rail, you watch the life of Sydney Cove swirl around you. Watermen in small skiffs yell for fares. Aboriginal families in canoes made of stringy bark glide silently past, selling freshly caught fish to the ship's cook. You see a group of convicts in their distinctive grey parrot jackets, working under guard on a new stone warehouse, their movements slow with a sullen exhaustion. Next to them, a group of well-dressed ladies with parasols promenade along the government house lawn, a bizarre tableau of imported gentility. The colony is a series of stark, overlapping realities that haven't yet decided how to blend. During a break, you and a few others are given the task of scouring the freshwater casks. The water from the tank stream, Sydney's main water supply, is notoriously muddy. As you haul the casks up, scrub them with vinegar, and prepare to refill them from a cleaner source, one of the old sailors points to a pile of peculiar, dense, greyish blocks also being loaded. "What's that, then?" you ask. "Fuel," he grunts. "They are burning the very bones of the country." He explains it is bank coal, a low-grade coal mined from cliffs just south of the settlement. It's a widely accepted historical fact that the discovery of coal near Sydney was a minor economic boon, but its use was primarily local. The surprising detail is its origin story. The first deposit was discovered not by a geologist, but by a group of escaped convicts hiding in coastal caves, who used the black rock to keep their fugitive fire smokeless. So, a commodity that would power the colony's early industry literally began as a tool for avoiding its justice. By the end of the fourth day, the Liberty sits noticeably lower in the water. Her character has changed. She is no longer a lean, swift messenger. She is a laden merchantman, heavy with the tangible yield of the land. The bustle slows. The final items are secured. The hatches are battened down for the long voyage home. That night, as the sounds of Sydney, the barking dogs, the occasional shout, the rustle of the unique bush, drift over the water, the mood aboard is peculiar. It is not the eager anticipation of arrival, but the sober readiness for departure. You have connected the threads. You have delivered the words from home and taken on the stuff of the new world to send back. The outbound journey was an active delivery. The return will be an active translation, carrying the physical essence of this strange, bright, harsh land back to the foggy heart of the empire. The anchor will be hauled at dawn. Shore leave in Sydney is a controlled, precious thing, meted out in short watches so the ship is never left unmanned. You step onto the circular quay, your land legs still uncertain, and are immediately absorbed into the raw, kinetic energy of the colony. The ground feels alarmingly solid, yet the world seems to tilt and sway around you, a persistent phantom of the sea your brain hasn't yet relinquished. The sounds are a cacophony after the orchestra of wind and water, the clatter of carts on rutted roads, the hawking of vendors selling fruit from baskets, the shouted negotiations in a dozen accents, from London's Cockney to the soft lilt of rural Ireland. You walk up George Street, a wide, dusty track more than a street, flanked by a jumble of architecture. Substantial sandstone buildings, the commissariat store, a few banks, stand shoulder to shoulder with rough-hewn timber shanties, their roofs of bark or corrugated iron. The smell is an aggressive bouquet: horse manure, fresh sawn cedar, baking bread from a roadside stall, the sickly sweet smell of rum from open tavern doors, and always, underneath it, that dry, peppery scent of the bush, creeping in from the uncleared land just beyond the last cottage. Your sailor's pay, advanced in a few coins, burns a hole in your pocket. Your first purchase is not rum, but fruit. At a market stall, you buy a strange, fuzzy brown egg-shaped thing the seller calls a peach. You bite into it. The flesh is tart, green, and utterly unfamiliar. It's not a peach at all, but you don't care. The juice is real, sweet and acidic, a shocking contrast to the dry hardtack and salt meat. You eat another fruit, a small, tart purple berry called a native currant, its flavor a wild, untamed thing. Food here has a different grammar. People watching is the chief entertainment. You see the full spectrum of this penal society. A chain gang clanks past, their leg irons scoring the dust, their faces blank with a resignation deeper than fatigue. Minutes later, a wealthy settler rides by on a fine horse, his clothes cut from English broadcloth, his wife beside him in a carriage, her bonnet a defiant flag of fashion. You see emancipists, former convicts who've served their time, now running bustling shops or rough-looking public houses, their success a quiet affront to the exclusives, the free settlers who view them with disdain. The social tension is palpable, written in every glance and turned shoulder. You find your way to a tavern near the rocks, a warren of narrow lanes favored by sailors. The air inside is thick with smoke and the smell of cheap rum and sweat. You fall into conversation with an old sealer, a man who spends months on the southern islands hunting skins. His face is a road map of scars, his hands monstrously large. He tells you tales of the Southern Ocean that make the liberties run through the 40s sound like a pleasure cruise. He speaks of islands shrouded in perpetual mist, of elephant seals that roar like dragons, of skirmishes with rival French and American sealers. His stories are a window into a parallel maritime world, one of lawless frontier exploitation happening just beyond the official gaze of the colony. He buys you a rum with a coin that looks like it's been chewed by a shark, and you buy him one in return. The currency of storytelling is stronger here than sterling. Later, on a whim, you follow a path leading up to a high point called Dawes Point. The view stops you in your tracks. You can see the entire glorious, convoluted harbor, the Liberty a toy ship in the cove below. But it's the other perspective that grips you. Looking west, past the few cleared fields, the land rises into a blue, hazy, seemingly endless wilderness. It is a vast, silent presence, pressing in on the noisy little settlement. You understand, in a way you couldn't from the deck of the ship, just how precarious this European outpost is. It is a tiny, noisy scab on the surface of an ancient, indifferent continent. As you make your way back to the wharf in the late afternoon light, you pass a small group of Aboriginal men and women. They are not begging, not interacting with the colonists. They are simply there, seated on the ground, making tools, talking softly. Their presence is calm, rooted, a stark contrast to the frantic comings and goings of the port. One of them, an older man with a deeply lined face, looks directly at you. His gaze is not hostile, not friendly, but profoundly assessing. It is a look that seems to see past your sailor's slops, past the ship you came on, to the very core of your transience. In that moment, you feel like the visitor you are. You are the one who is strange, who has sailed from the edge of their world to briefly trespass on its shore. Historians still argue whether the early colonial period saw moments of genuine cultural curiosity and exchange, or whether the gulf of understanding was simply too vast, the momentum of displacement too powerful, from the very first moment. That silent, measuring look feels like the entirety of that unanswerable debate. You return to the Liberty as dusk settles. The sounds and smells of Sydney cling to you. Wood smoke, dust, that strange fruit. You are no longer just a sailor who has been to sea. You have been ashore in the Antipodes. You have tasted its fruit, breathed its dust, and felt the weight of its ancient gaze. The voyage home will now be a journey away from something real, not just toward something familiar. The Liberty departs on the dawn tide, the shouted commands and the rumble of the anchor cable sounding a familiar prologue to a profoundly different story. The sense of leaving is palpable, a collective exhalation threaded with melancholy. Sydney Cove recedes, the sandstone cliffs of the Heads open to swallow you, and once more you are delivered back to the open Pacific. But the ship you are on is not the one that arrived. She is heavier, deeper, her movements more stately and deliberate. The mountain of wool in her hold has settled her into the water, making her less nimble, more resistant to the helm. Her spirit feels changed. Where before she was a greyhound, lean and eager for the chase, now she is a laden cart horse, strong but burdened. The crew feels it too. The outward journey was fueled by the novelty of the destination. The homeward leg is powered by the gravity of home, a deeper, more patient pull. The routine re-establishes itself, but the rhythm is off by a beat. The work is the same, the watches, the sail handling, the holestoning, but the talk is different. Conversations now look backward, not forward. Men discuss what they saw ashore, the taste of the fruit, the look of the women, the strangeness of the trees. The little souvenirs they've tucked away, a carved shell from a Hobart Street urchin, a strange seed pod, a folded copy of the Sydney Herald, are taken out and examined like holy relics. You find yourself, during a quiet night watch, trying to describe the exact dusty grey green of a eucalyptus leaf to a sailor from Dorset who has only ever known oak and ash. You fail. The memory is already becoming a story, the reality of it softening at the edges. The Pacific, on this eastern side of the continent, is a gentler master than the Southern Ocean. The winds are more variable, the seas are warmer, kinder blue. The course is southeast, aiming to pick up the westerlies again, but lower, to avoid the worst of the Southern Ocean's fury on the return. There is a calculated caution in Captain Finch's navigation now. He has a hull full of valuable cargo and a crew carrying the fatigue of a long voyage. The priority is preservation, not speed. In this slower, more reflective atmosphere, the social microcosm of the ship undergoes subtle shifts. The shared triumph of the outward journey has bonded the crew, but the long confinement is wearing thin. Petty irritations flare over nothing, a misplaced mug, a snore too loud in the forecastle. The ship boys, emboldened by their own survival, test boundaries and receive sharper rebukes. Even the officers seem shorter-tempered. Dr. Alderton's sickbay sees more men with minor complaints that seem to be more about a need for respite than actual illness. The idyllic camaraderie of the deep ocean is revealing, it seems. You are all getting tired of each other's faces, stories, and smells. It is during this period that you are assigned to assist the ship's carpenter, Mr. Lowe. His domain is the tiny carpentry shop in the bow, a fragrant cave of sawdust and pine pitch. His current task is repairing a series of small, beautifully made wooden boxes that came aboard in Sydney. They are specimen boxes, designed to hold the botanical samples being sent to Kew. One has a cracked hinge. As you help him fit a new brass plate, he points to the wood. "Jarrah," he says, tapping the dark, blood-red timber. "Hard as iron. Dulls a saw in minutes. They've got forests of this over there." He works with a craftsman's respect for the material. Then he shows you something else. A strange, pale, incredibly lightweight wood from a crate that held feathers. "Corkwood," he mutters. "Floats like a duck. Useless for shipbuilding, but imagine a lifebelt made of it." In his hands, the colony is not an abstraction of wool and convicts. It is a catalogue of novel materials, each with properties that whisper of a land that does things differently. Historians still argue whether the long return voyage, with its heightened fatigue and introspective mood, led to more instances of indiscipline or even mutiny on packet ships, or whether the powerful law of finally reaching home acted as the ultimate governor on behavior. On the Liberty, it is a tense equilibrium. The captain knows it. You see him walking the decks more, his eyes missing nothing, his conversations with the men more frequent, if brief. He is not just navigating the ocean, he is navigating the morale of his floating world. One afternoon, a school of porpoise escorts the ship, their sleek arcs through the water a joyful contrast to the ship's labored progress. Watching them, you feel a pang that is hard to define. It is not homesickness, exactly. It is the realization that you are between worlds. You have been marked by the one you left behind, its vast skies, its strange scents, its silent, ancient presence. You are carrying a physical part of it in the hold. You are no longer the person who left London. You are a hybrid now, a creature of the deep sea and the far shore, sailing toward a home that may no longer recognize the man you've become. The Liberty plows her steady furrow south, the days growing shorter again, the air colder. Ahead lies the greatest test of all, the icy gatekeeper between the oceans, Cape Horn. The cold returns not as a gradual shift, but as an ambush. The temperate Pacific blues drain to a steely gray. The wind, which had been capricious, finds a new and singular purpose, screaming uninterrupted from the west, funneled and accelerated by the sheer planetary geography ahead. You are approaching the southern tip of the Americas, the ultimate maritime gauntlet, Cape Horn. The mood aboard the Liberty hardens into a grim, focused silence. All petty grievances are forgotten. The shared enemy is no longer boredom or each other, but the imminent, screaming reality of the Horn. Preparation is a somber liturgy. Every movable object is secured with extra lashings. The heavy weather storm sails are bent on, their dark, thick canvas looking like armor. The hatches are battened down with tarpaulins and nailed fast. The pigs and chickens in their pens on deck are moved to a precarious shelter below. Their fate is now tied irrevocably to yours. The ship's boys are given the grim task of ensuring the lifelines, ropes strung along the deck, are taut and fast. You are issued an extra ration of rum, not for celebration, but for fuel. The first sight of the region is not land, but ice. A pale, spectral shape glimmers on the horizon to starboard. A tabular iceberg, a drifting island of frozen freshwater, its cliffs glowing a faint, unearthly blue in the twilight. It is breathtaking and terrifying. The sea temperature plummets. The spray that flies over the deck is no longer just salt water. It is a stinging, freezing slush. You dress in every layer you possess, but the cold finds its way in, a penetrating damp that settles in your bones. For 2 days, you beat south against the mounting wind, the Liberty crashing into steep, frigid head seas that explode over the bow in torrents of green water. The pumps are manned continuously, their monotonous, desperate clank a heartbeat beneath the storm's roar. Sleep is impossible. You catnap when you can, fully clothed and wet, in a corner of the forecastle, your body braced against the violent, corkscrewing motion. The world shrinks to the next task, the next wave, the next breath of freezing air. Then, through a brief tear in the driving sleet, you see it. Cape Horn is not a dramatic spike, but a low, black, cruel-looking claw of land, lashed by an endless procession of breaking waves that look like moving mountain ranges. The sound is apocalyptic, the deep-throated roar of the ocean fighting the continent. The captain's goal is not to round it close, but to give it a wide, wary berth, fighting far out into the Drake Passage to find a sliver of sea room where the wind and current might, just might, allow you to slip around. The attempt is a brutal, days-long fight. The wind is now a physical wall. The sails are reefed down to tiny, stubborn handkerchiefs of canvas, just enough to give the helmsman control. 2 men are lashed to the great wheel, fighting it with every ounce of strength as the ship tries to be thrown beam on to the waves. Going aloft is a death-defying act. You are sent up once to secure a loose block, the ratlins iced over, your hands numb within seconds. From the swaying mast, the view is a vision of hell. The Liberty wallowing in a valley between liquid cliffs, the sky a roiling ceiling of black and gray, the horn itself a smudge of pure malevolence to leeward. You complete the job with a frozen, fumbling urgency, sliding back to the deck on a backstay, your palms shredded. A widely accepted historical fact is that the invention of copper sheathing for ship hulls, which prevented the ravages of wood-boring worms and fouling, was one of the key technological advances that made long voyages like this possible. But here, facing the horn, you witness its lesser-known, chilling side effect. The copper, beaten thin by ice and countless impacts, can tear. A leak springs in the forward hold, near the waterline. The carpenter and his mates must attempt to repair from inside, in near darkness, with water pouring in around a patched plank, the cold sea just inches from their faces, the sound of it a terrifying roar against the hull. They succeed, but for an hour, the entire ship holds its breath. Historians still argue whether the reputation of Cape Horn was amplified by the era of sail to create a mythology of supreme seamanship, or whether the objective conditions there, the convergence of oceans, the unimpeded fetch of the Southern Ocean, the ferocious willy-waw winds, genuinely made it the most dangerous nautical point on the globe for a square-rigged vessel. As you huddle by the frozen pump, your body a single ache, there is no argument in your mind. This is pure, elemental trial. It is not about speed or skill anymore, it is about endurance, about the ship's simple ability to hold together, and the crew's will to keep her so. And then, after an eternity of cold and noise and fear, you gain an inch. The wind, impossibly, backs a few points. The current, sensed more than seen, gives a slight, favorable nudge. Captain Finch seizes the microscopic opportunity. A new course is shouted, passed from man to man over the gale. The Liberty's bow swings painfully, laboriously to the east. For a horrific minute, she is in the trough, rolling gunwales under. But then she catches, she finds the new angle, and she begins to drive. You are not beating against it anymore. You are running, slewing down the face of the waves, the horn finally, blessedly, falling behind your left shoulder. You have rounded the horn. There is no cheer. The men are too spent, too cold. There is only a slow, deep exhalation, visible in the cloud of their breath in the icy air. The ship is a wreck, ice on every line, splintered wood on the deck, every man aboard bruised and saturated. But she is through the gate. The Pacific is behind you. The Atlantic, and the long road home, lies ahead. The worst is over. You have met the dragon at the bottom of the world, and you have, by the narrowest of margins, survived. The violence of the horn is replaced by a profound, aching fatigue. The Liberty staggers into the South Atlantic like a prize fighter after 15 rounds, battered but victorious. The immediate, screaming danger has passed, but the cost is tallied in the grey faces of the men and the ship's new, subtle complaints, a persistent groan from the foremast step, a slower response from the helm. The crew moves with the careful economy of the deeply tired. The cold lingers, but it is now just a bitter chill, not a lethal force. Captain Finch's strategy is clear: run east. He drives the ship hard, but not recklessly, seeking the heart of the westerly winds that will become your chariot home. The goal is to lay your hands on the brave west winds of the higher southern latitudes and let them fling you toward the longitude of the Cape of Good Hope, completing the great circumnavigation of the Southern Ocean. It is a chase, but a calculated one. You are no longer explorers or messengers, you are transporters, and the precious, sodden wool in the hold is your charge. The routine reasserts itself, but it is a ghost of its former self. The work is done with a weary competence, the banter muted. Men nurse small injuries, sprained wrists from fighting the wheel, cuts that are slow to heal in the cold, damp air. Dr. Alderton is busy with his plasters and lime juice, fighting a resurgence of coughs and the deep, bone weariness that could slide into something worse. The ship herself is under constant, gentle scrutiny. The carpenter and his mates are everywhere, tapping timbers, listening to joints, reinforcing where they can. The Liberty has been tested to her limit, and every creak is now listened to with diagnostic intensity. The days begin to blur again, marked by the steady, rapid run to the east. The sea regains a monotonous, majestic rhythm. The albatrosses return, their effortless glide a mocking contrast to your labored, human progress. You are in a part of the ocean even more empty than before. You have looped behind the shipping lanes. The sky is a vast, cold dome, the sun a pale, distant coin. Your world is the ship, the circle of grey water, and the unwavering line of your wake, pointing the way home. In this suspended, exhausted state, small things become magnified. The daily ration of rum, once a pleasant diversion, is now a vital warmth, a tiny flame in the belly against the pervasive chill. The hardtack is worse than ever, weevily and damp, but you eat it without complaint, your body craving the calories. Sleep, when it comes in your damp hammock, is deep and dreamless, a temporary annihilation. You find yourself thinking of home not with aching longing, but with a strange, detached curiosity. The memories of London's docks, of your life before the mast, feel like scenes from a book about someone else. It is during this period that you participate in a quiet, universal shipboard ritual, the careful, almost reverent, maintenance of personal effects. With the voyage nearing its end, men begin to prepare for the return to society. Rusty razors are sharpened with great ceremony on a fine-grained stone. The one good shirt, carefully preserved in oiled cloth, is examined for mold. A sailor from Devon spends hours repairing a small, wooden music box, a gift for his daughter. Its tinny, faltering tune becomes a haunting anthem of anticipation for the whole forecastle. You unpack your own meager sea bag. The clothes you wore in London smell of mildew and stranger things, the peppery dust of Sydney, the lanolin of the wool bales. They are artifacts from a past life. Historians still argue whether the mental state of sailors on the final leg of such epic voyages was one of heightened morale or a kind of numbness, born of extreme fatigue and sensory deprivation. On the Liberty, it feels like the latter. The thrill is gone. The fear is banked. What remains is a dogged, professional determination to see the job through. Even Captain Finch seems to have shed his last veneer of aloofness. He walks the deck with the carpenter, discussing repairs in low tones. He takes his turn with the sextant under the grey sky, his calculations a daily prayer for a favorable current. Then, one afternoon, the calculation changes. The course ordered is no longer due east, but a subtle turn to the northeast. The word spreads through the ship like a weak current of electricity. You are beginning the long climb up the Atlantic. You are pointing your bow toward the equator, toward Europe, toward home. The chase is over. The west winds have done their duty. Now, you must work your way back through the variables of the tropics, past the equator, and into the North Atlantic. The end is not in sight, but the final corner has been turned. The Liberty, weary but unbroken, alters course. The Southern Ocean releases its grip. Ahead lies the doldrums, the tropics, and the final, familiar stretch. The great circle is nearly complete. The last month is a slow unwinding of tension, a gradual return to a world you'd almost forgotten. The Liberty claws her way north, first through the capricious variables of the South Atlantic, then into the breathless, sweating grip of the doldrums once more. This time, the equatorial calm is not a prelude to ritual, but to a deep, patient waiting. The sails hang limp, the deck shimmering with heat haze. But the mood is different. There is no ceremony, only a quiet, communal endurance. You have crossed this line before, you are shellbacks. The boredom is familiar, almost comfortable. You watch flying fish skitter and wait for the wind. When the northeast trades finally find you, They are a warm, steadying hand on your back. The ship heels to a gentle, familiar angle, and the wake begins to hiss again. The temperature slowly drops from oppressive to temperate. The night sky shifts imperceptibly night by night. The Southern Cross sinks lower, lower, and finally dips below the southern horizon one evening, lost to you perhaps forever. In its place, old friends reappear. The bulk of Orion, the steadfast North Star, Polaris, a faint but growing beacon ahead. These celestial signposts are more stirring than any chart. They are the true map home. The Atlantic becomes busier. A sail on the horizon is no longer a miracle, but a regular occurrence. You sight merchant brigs, a tired-looking whaler heading south, and once, thrillingly, a sleek Royal Navy frigate under full sail, her ensign snapping, on a course that intersects yours. She signals a greeting, and your ship's signal flags are hoisted in reply, a brief, formal conversation between two dots in the immense blue. It is a reminder that you are re-entering the world of men and nations, of rules and routines beyond the private law of your own deck. The final weeks are a study in controlled anticipation. The ship is cleaned as she has never been cleaned before. The holystoning of the deck becomes an act of devotion, the pale wood a testament to your return. The brasswork is polished until it gleams like fire in the sun. The wool bales in the hold, your constant companions, are inspected for damp. Even the crew undergoes a transformation. Beards are shaved, hair is cut with the ruthless communal shears. Your one good shirt is washed in seawater and laid out to dry, stiff with salt but presentable. You look at your hands, calloused, scarred, the nails broken, the skin permanently etched with lines of grime no scrubbing will remove. They are no longer the hands you left with. The provisions grow dire. The hardtack is now more weevil than biscuit. The last of the salt pork is stringy and foul. The water, though strictly rationed, has developed a stale, flat taste. But no one complains. Hunger and thirst are just final mileposts. You catch a last, magnificent tuna, and its rich, red meat feels like a farewell gift from the sea itself. You eat it under a sky that is softening to the milky blue of northern latitudes. Then, on a morning shrouded in a cool, damp fog, the cry comes. It is not from the masthead, but from a keen-eared sailor on the bow who hears it first, the deep, mournful groan of a channel boy. Then another. The fog lifts in ragged patches, and there it is, a smudge on the horizon that does not shift or fade. Land. Not a wild, foreign coast, but the low, green, unmistakable shoreline of southwestern England. A cheer goes up, raw and thin, more relief than joy. Captain Finch allows it for a full minute before calling the watch to trim sails for the Channel approach. The next 2 days are a blur of pilot boats, signal flags, and the growing, crowded familiarity of the English Channel. You pass Eddystone Lighthouse, its white tower a sentinel of civilization. Other ships crowd around you, coastal traders, fishing smacks, packet ships like your own flying their company pennants. The water turns a muddy brown. The air smells of wet earth, wood smoke, and, faintly, the distant, complex stench of a city. And then, up the Thames. The journey reverses itself. The banks close in, dotted with villages, then towns, then the grim, glorious sprawl of London's docklands. The same tugs, belching thicker smoke now, come to nudge you. The same warehouses, the same shouting stevedores. But you are not the same. The Liberty glides to her berth in the East India docks. The lines are thrown, made fast. The engine stops. The silence is absolute. You have arrived. The voyage of 20,000 miles, of storms and calms, of the Cape and the Horn, of strange stars and stranger shores, is over. You stand on the deck, your sea bag at your feet, listening to the land sounds that once were your entire world and now sound foreign. You have delivered the wool, the mail, the news. You have completed the circle. You are home. But as you step onto the cobblestones, the ground feels less solid than the deck of your ship. You are home, but the liberty, the ocean, and the vast, silent continent on the other side of the world have irrevocably become home, too. The great circle is closed now. The anchor is down, the lines are fast, and the endless, rhythmic creak of the Liberty's timbers is slowly being absorbed by the louder, closer sounds of the port. Think of her, resting there in the murky Thames water, her hull scoured by southern ice and tropical sun, her sails furled for the last time on this journey, holding within her grains of sand from Sydney Cove and salt from the roaring Forties. Think of the letters delivered, the lives altered by a few lines of ink you carried across the world, the wall that will soon become a coat for a clerk in Manchester. The vast, empty silences of the deep ocean, the screaming gales, the breathtaking sunsets over an empty sea. They are memories now, settling into the quiet corners of your mind like sediment. The world is both impossibly larger and comfortingly smaller than it was when you left. You have traversed its widest, wildest highways, and you have returned. So let the images soften now. The green-black waves of Biscay, the dizzying sway of the mast, the strange, sweet taste of an unfamiliar fruit on a dusty street. Let them blur and blend into the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. The voyage is done. The story is told. The quiet of your room is the deepest, most peaceful harbor of all. Rest now, with the knowledge that the world turns, the winds blow, and you, for a little while, sailed with all of them.